In our first tale of dark temptation, the City of Light, shrouded in mystery.
This was the 7th murder. Police are starting to wonder, do we have a serial killer here?
Haunted by a man with a macabre obsession.
Nicolas was fascinated with death.
And an appetite for murder.
He started to wonder what human flesh might taste like.
And later,
he was a decent person who would never hurt another soul.
A missing man caught up in a dance of darkness.
Horror. It references necrophilia and murder and destruction.
The final verse will shock this quiet town.
I've come across many bloody, depraved crimes where the motives were outrageous. I have never come across a case like this.
The city of Paris prides itself as the home of fine dining. A stylish hub of culinary delights and exotic delicacies.
Michel, allez! Robert, j'ai 2 amandes, un lapin. Tu es bon? Bien, j'arrête.
In the early 1990s, Thierry Bissonnier trades in this mouth-watering temptation.
Thierry Bissonnier was a man who loved food.
He owned a restaurant in the Paris area.
He was a restaurateur, and he was pursuing an elegant and cultured life.
Despite his busy life, the 34-year-old can always find time for his favorite customers, his parents. Thierry is devoted to his mom and dad, calling them every day. But in early October 1994, Thierry doesn't phone home.
His parents usually heard from him every day. They gradually became concerned and then eventually dismayed. So they went by his flat 3 days after they had heard from him.
Jerry?
There they found their son bludgeoned and shot to death on the floor.
A search of Thierry's apartment reveals he's also been robbed.
His wallet, his identification, his checkbook, even stole some oddball things like a clock radio.
French police find no fingerprints. The only clue comes from Thierry's computer.
He went on a dating site online.
Thierry's been visiting gay chat sites.
All he was guilty of doing was looking for a little bit of love.
And he's not the first gay man to be murdered in Paris this month.
This was one in a series of similar homicides that had occurred that month in Paris involving homosexuals. This was the 7th murder. So now police are starting to wonder, do we have a serial killer here? Are these all connected?
For 2 weeks, French detectives seek clues to the crazed killer's identity. They have nothing to go on. Until a strange man walks into an electronics store.
He went to go buy a VCR from the store.
The customer tries to pay for the video recorder with a check from Thierry Bissonnier's checkbook. His ID is a crude forgery.
He used Thierry's identification, only he had placed his photo over top of the victim's photo. So when the clerk looked at the license, it was very obvious that something was wrong here, that this wasn't correct. So he notified police.
Realizing the jig is up, the man flees. But he leaves behind his fake ID. Now cops have a picture of their prime suspect. A few weeks later, police spot the strange man again in an unlikely place. A Paris night spot famous for temptation. The Moulin Rouge.
And I said, hey, this looks like the guy whose photo was on that driver's license a couple weeks back trying to use the stolen identification.
The man's name is Nicolas Claux. The 22-year-old seems an unlikely killer.
He was an attractive man, very nice looking, nice physique, well-mannered, well-read.
When detectives search his apartment, they soon realize good manners can hide a multitude of sins.
The police walked into this room and beheld this scene of horror.
The French are renowned for their sense of style. But Nicolas Claux's home has a macabre twist.
Every wall was covered with the most lurid posters. He had a huge collection of porn, VCR tapes.
They found bone fragments, they found teeth, they found all these items he had stolen out of mausoleums.
He had an urn he had stolen from a cemetery that actually had a young girl's mortal remains in it.
He had even made wind chimes out of human bones.
But this ghoulish decor is just a taste of things to come.
You could sense the evil.
A shadow has fallen over the City of Light in October of 1994. 7 men have been murdered in Paris within a month. The latest, 34-year-old restaurateur, Thierry Bissonnier.
Now police are starting to wonder, do we have a serial killer here? Are these all connected?
Paris police have arrested a suspect, Nicolas Claux. Inside his home, they find a macabre collection of human remains.
They came upon a scene of horror that looked more like a museum than a residence.
It's like something out of Frankenstein's monster. And in his refrigerator, the pièce de résistance.
The fridge was full of blood bags.
Rumors swirl about this strange young suspect. His gruesome decor exposes a morbid obsession.
Nicolas Claux was fascinated with death and the dead.
That fascination began in his childhood.
When he was about 10 years old, he got into a heated argument with his grandfather. During that argument, his grandfather suffered a pulmonary embolism and he died. And according to Nico, he always felt like he was kind of blamed for his grandfather's death.
He not only probably felt very guilty, but he also had this kind of traumatic exposure to death at such a young age.
Forensic psychologist Dr. Stephen Diamond says that early trauma came to haunt Nicolas Claux.
He became cold. He became withdrawn, detached from people. So when one feels completely alienated from the world, this kind of a fascination can be a way of trying to have human interaction, but with a dead person. It's a way of actually trying to have a relationship with a human being, but not with a live human being.
As an adult, Nicholas fills his life with death, prowling the Gothic graveyards of Paris.
He really became obsessed about hanging out at cemeteries. He felt like he was the king, like it was his kingdom, and he ruled over it.
At first, he just hangs out with the dead. Then he starts to steal from them.
Eventually, he needed more, so that was when, according to Nico, he began breaking into mausoleums.
Taking their trinkets is not enough. Nico's needs grow darker.
He opened a coffin, and there was a corpse in there that had been in there for quite a while, almost completely decomposed, and he actually stabbed the corpse.
He took a screwdriver and he just kept stabbing. He stabbed her 24 times. He got a certain thrill or excitement out of death.
It was almost like he was practicing committing murder on this corpse. Part of what he was doing was also related in some way to some kind of an expression of his hatred toward other people and toward society and toward life. If you hate life, then you worship death.
Grave robbing is dangerous business. So Nicholas finds a more legitimate way to satiate his desires.
He found his way into a profession where he could derive the greatest pleasure.
He ended up going to a hospital where he got a job working as a morgue attendant.
He would prepare the bodies when they came in and do the incisions. Of course, many times he was alone with those corpses.
Alone with his dark temptation, Nico is free to indulge his fantasies.
He admits to fondling the corpses, to admiring them, the lividity of a corpse, with all the beautiful, subtle colors.
He was fascinated. He said the whole experience was very thrilling.
This hands-on experience only fuels his compulsion. He decides to take it one horrifying step further.
He started to wonder what human flesh might taste like.
He became fascinated with wanting to actually eat the human person and see if he could ingest what that person was by eating them.
In a deserted morgue in the dead of night, Nicholas feeds his obsession.
He said that it was very easy for him to cut off a strip of flesh.
The meat that he ate, he compared it to tartar steak. The first time he had eaten human flesh, the thought that popped into his mind was, wow, I'm a cannibal. This is cool.
He has crossed the final human threshold.
Cannibalism is one of the ultimate prohibited behaviors in society.
For Nicolas Claux, it's the perfect way to satisfy his all-consuming passion.
It's the fascination with the human body after death. If you really want to know death and know about a corpse, what better way is there than to actually eat the flesh?
Nico acquires a taste for this taboo. He wants to continue his feast at home.
He would take pieces of meat home, he'd cook it on the stove, but he said he actually preferred it raw. He said he mainly liked the flesh in the backs or on the back of the legs. He tried to avoid the flesh from the breasts because he said it was too fatty.
And to wash down his culinary creation, he has just the right drop.
He would steal blood, bring it home, mix it with protein to thicken it up, and drink it.
Even these gruesome dinners won't satisfy Nicolas Claux's cravings.
Nico was constantly pushing the envelope to get a newer and more outrageous sensation. If he'd had a sensation before, that was old hat. He needed to know what was next.
What's next on the menu is unthinkable. Paris restaurateur Thierry Bissonnier not only relishes fine food, he loves beautiful music.
Thierry played classical music. That was his passion.
But his other passions are harder to satisfy. Even here in the City of Love. In October 1994, Thierry turns to his computer to find romance. He is soon contacted by someone called Nico.
He went on a dating site online, and that was how he ended up meeting his victim. Eventually, both agreed to meet, and Nico said he was invited over to the man's house.
Knock, knock, knock. And Thierry Bissonnier opens the door.
Thierry's blind date is self-confessed cannibal Nicolas Claux.
And he comes. He didn't really waste a lot of time with preliminaries.
When Thierry closed the door, Nico had a pistol pointed directly at his eye. He said there was this awkward moment where they both just kind of looked at each other. He said it's like he knew what was going to happen, but didn't know how to react. He goes back over, shoots him 2-3 more times in the back of the head.
After 4 shots to the head, Thierry's still not dead.
It was all very cold, deliberate acts. He didn't realize how hard it was to kill someone.
Instead of being reviled by his actions, the murder whets Nico's appetite.
He goes in the kitchen, finds some cookies, decides he's gonna sit in the corner and eat the cookies while he watches the man bleed out and die.
He wanted to know what was it like to watch someone actually cross over into death. According to Nico's account, he spent a total of about 15 minutes with that dying victim, observing him as closely as he could. And he mentioned the breathing pattern, the sounds that the victim made. As the colors changed in the body, there was no compassion there. There was no sense that this is a human life.
Claux's morbid fascination doesn't end there.
After he was dead, he took the time to take a pencil and to stick the eraser in the bullet wound to see how deep the bullet went.
Nicolas has fulfilled one fantasy: to watch someone die. But tonight, he's only dining on cookies.
He was finished. His research was over.
Before Nico leaves, he steals Thierry's wallet and checkbook, then delivers one final blow.
He picked up a flower pot and broke it over top of the victim's head. In Nico's mind, that was probably just making sure the job was done. Then walked outside and left.
crime writer Sandra London corresponded with Nicolas Claux. She believes this murder was a practice run for Nico's next meal.
It was supposed to be an experiment. In his overall plan, he would be able to take a victim, kill them ritually, drink their blood, consume their flesh.
But Nico never gets a chance to satisfy his hunger.
Nicolas Claux could have gotten away with this murder if he had conducted himself like a professional perpetrator. Instead, he showed himself to be an absolute amateur, taking the victim's ID, committing a crude forgery with it, and trying to pass a forged check.
In November 1994, Nicolas Claux is charged with the murder of Thierry Bissonnier. Instead of shying away from his dark deeds, he revels in them.
Most perpetrators would hide it, but Nico wanted us to know about it.
I think part of it had to do with attention. I think he wanted people to know his name. He wanted to step out of the shadows and finally be recognized.
He wants to own it. He wants to say, yes, I am a proud cannibal. I am a super predator.
Nicolas Claux even hopes to cash in on his moment in the spotlight.
After Nico became famous by virtue of his trial and all that publicity, I think he was trying to figure out, now what am I going to do with this fame or infamy that I have? Nico was trying to put together a cookbook about his recipes. He said he wanted to have the world's first cannibal cafe.
He also turns his hand to painting.
I asked him what he wanted to do with his artwork in the future, and he said he wanted to paint corpse, and he had limited his palette, and that was what he wanted to do next, to paint the corpse because of the beautiful, subtle colors.
Sandra London knows Nicolas Claux better than most. She worked with him years later.
I was asked to do a book on the reality of vampires, and so he was very cooperative with me. He did the illustrations for the book by painting oil paintings of all of the famous vampires that I was writing about.
But Claux the cannibal has broken a sacred taboo. He is not lauded for his crime. He is reviled for these gruesome acts.
The sheer horror, the visceral horror of the things that he's so blithe about came as a bit of a surprise to him. He thinks the culture's ready for this, and the culture is not or never will be. He was not admired. He was not asked to be the king of the prom or anything. People are horrified.
As for the string of other murders that year in Paris, police are never able to link them to Nicolas Claux.
If Nico had not been caught for the murder, I don't think he would have stopped committing crimes. I think in his mind, he would have had to start to think about how he could top that. What's the next thing I could do?
The reason he kind of graduated from just breaking into cemeteries and mortuaries into actually committing murder, I think part of it is the need to satisfy the curiosity more deeply. And I think part of it is becoming more emboldened by being able to get away with what he was doing.
In May 1997, Nicolas Claux is found guilty of murder. A panel of defense experts diagnoses him with borderline psychotic personality disorder. Under French law, he receives a reduced sentence due to diminished responsibility.
It's a gray area in which the judge or the jury takes into consideration the mental status of the person without having to go so far as to say that they are legally insane.
Nicolas Claux is sentenced to 12 years for murder. In 2004, after just 7 years, he is free and is once again walking the streets of Paris. Nestled in the heart of Pennsylvania's Pocono Mountains, Stroudsburg is a town to which cliches cling. Words like charming, picturesque, and quaint. Likewise, its inhabitants are, inevitably, fine, upstanding folk. They don't come any more fine or upstanding than former U.S. Army soldier Michael Goucher. Having served his country, the 21-year-old now loves serving his community.
He worked as a custodian at the local school. He attended church regularly. He was part of the choir. He played the organ for the choir.
He was interested in law enforcement. He did enroll in the local crime watch.
So it's strange when on February 3rd, 2009, Michael simply vanishes.
The family received a call from Michael's employer that he had not shown up for work.
They wait for Michael to get in touch.
He would always call, text.
As days pass, the phones stay silent.
When he went missing, his family was definitely concerned because this was very unusual for him to be gone and not let anyone know or contact anyone in any way as to where he was for so long a period of time.
Stroudsburg police aren't worried. Michael's probably been lured by Temptations out of town.
He met somebody, he was out, he's a young guy, he'll call, he'll come back, you know, no big deal.
Soon, Michael's disappearance becomes a big deal.
Once his car was found, then that all changed.
We discovered the car abandoned up in Price Township off Snow Hill Road.
But there's no sign of Michael Goucher. So detectives take their search indoors and online, tracking Michael's computer activity. They discover he's been chatting to another Stroudsburg man, 19-year-old Sean Freemore. And it's more than just a friendship.
Michael Goucher met Sean Freemore on the internet.
Their flirting goes further when Sean asks to meet up. It's arranged for the day Michael disappeared. According to Sean Freemore, Michael didn't make their rendezvous.
And we were supposed to meet up around the time he went missing, but he never showed.
Why did Michael get cold feet? Was he ashamed of his tryst with Sean? After all, being gay has already cost him his military career.
This was before the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. When it came out that Mike was gay, he had to leave the military.
Did Michael Goucher stage his own disappearance to keep his secrets in the closet? There are deep, dark secrets in this town. Beneath the snow-white veneer lurks a world of shadows. In February, Pennsylvania's Pocono Mountains are transformed into a winter wonderland. Snow makes everything look clean and pure, but it can also hide many secrets. In the winter of 2009, Stroudsburg Army veteran Michael Goucher has been missing for more than a week. His car found abandoned in the woods. Has he staged his own disappearance? Or something far more sinister?
It was very much out of character for Mr. Goucher to not be in contact with his family. He was a decent person who I would think would never hurt another soul.
Police have one lead. Michael was meant to meet up with his new boyfriend the night he disappeared.
Michael Goucher met Sean Fremore on the internet, which can be risky behavior.
Was the Army vet ashamed of his online affair? Michael's family says his sexuality was never hidden.
His family, they were aware of that. They accepted it. They were supportive of him. It wasn't a deep, dark secret for them.
Detectives want to know more about Sean Fremore.
Hey man, you wanna pass me that hatchet?
They find out he spends most of his time with his childhood pal, 17-year-old Ian Seagraves.
They both live in a similar area. They also went to school together, and that's how they initially met.
So, was she worth it? She was worth it? Really? Yeah, man, she was worth it. Did you not see them?
They'd hang out together, play video games, things of that nature.
These days, video games are lame. The teenage friends tap into a darker temptation.
Mr. Fremore and Mr. Seagraves were very much into the Juggalo subculture, the accoutrements of being a Juggalo.
Being a Juggalo means that with a smear of face paint, Sean and Ian can leave their mundane lives behind.
Juggalos are devotees of a hardcore rap group known as Insane Clown Posse. The band consists of 2 members, and they dress up like kind of scary clowns.
Across America, more than 1 million teenagers have jumped on the Juggalo bandwagon.
The followers of this particular subculture tend to be male, tend to be young, men who feel disenfranchised, who feel like they don't have a voice in the culture.
Subculture expert Ethan Gilsdorf says it's an age-old tale. Teenagers using music as a way to rebel.
Like a lot of subcultures, the Juggalos tends to attract people who otherwise don't fit in. They might be people who consider themselves misfits, people who don't have a group that they identify with in traditional mainstream culture.
They seem to be a club for kids who aren't welcome in other clubs.
Except this is not your average kids club.
The particular kind of rap music that they sing is known as horrorcore. They've created this mythology called the Dark Carnival, which is a kind of end-of-days mythology. Pretty graphic, pretty apocalyptic. It references cannibalism and necrophilia and murder and destruction, all kinds of pretty dark themes.
What some Juggalos don't realize is the violent lyrics are meant to be ironic. The band is telling their followers what not to do.
They're not really saying that kids should go out and commit violent acts or do these horrible things that they're depicting. There's a kind of tongue-in-cheek quality to it.
It's a message lost on Sean Fremore and Ian Seagraves. Their dark carnival grows even blacker when they start writing their own horrorcore rap songs, trying to outdo each other with violent, bloodthirsty lyrics.
My hatchet is my friend, and he does what I intend. If you think I tell a joke, then I'll lodge it in your throat.
The writings they made, something I couldn't relate to, but clearly they had a sense of euphoria, exhilaration.
And the last thing that you see is my hatchet friend and me. Hey, let's see him back here. My hatchet is my friend, and he does what I intend.
And of course, the danger with any of this kind of pop cultural, cult-like or subculture activity is that some people can take it too seriously.
Perhaps missing man Michael Goucher is also hiding under the face paint. Lured into this dark club by his new boyfriend. But cops can't make the connection.
Michael Goucher wasn't a follower of the band or similar bands, wasn't in any way affiliated with that subculture.
So the search for Michael Goucher continues. And in the woods near where his car was found, a state trooper spots something peeking from the virgin snow.
He noticed multiple sets of footprints going into the woods from the road. He saw what appeared to be a shoe laying on top of the snow. He got his binoculars out, he looked some more, and he saw what looked like a human hand protruding somewhat from the snow.
It is the hand of Michael Goucher. His body buried beneath a blanket of snow.
The snow around his face had melted. His eyes were open wide. He had piercing blue eyes, and they just looked blankly up at the sky.
It was a brutal death.
There were upwards of 40 stab wounds on the victim.
Nearby, police find a meat cleaver and 2 bloodied butcher's knives. Perhaps it's a vicious robbery.
His left front pocket had been turned out. You could see the white pocket sticking out. And at that time, we didn't find a wallet with him, car keys, a cell phone.
Then, a resident reports seeing someone near Michael's abandoned car the next day. Sean Freemore. Sean denies any involvement in the vicious attack until police search his car and find 2 notebooks. The contents are bone-chilling.
Each of them had a rap about what occurred that night.
But there's more. Police also find Michael Goucher's stolen audio recorder.
We knew the victim had a digital recorder that he would record his organ church music on. There was more than just church music on it.
When they press play, they unravel the horror of this crime.
It was almost like a roadmap to how it all occurred.
In the sleepy town of Stroudsburg in 2009, 2 teenagers are spiraling out of control. Sean Freemore and Ian Seagraves have entered the dark carnival of the Juggalos.
My hatchet is my friend, and he does what I intend. If you think I tell a joke, then I'll lodge it in your throat.
It's pretty graphic, pretty apocalyptic. It references cannibalism and necrophilia and murder.
Police investigating the vicious murder of Michael Goucher discover these teen rappers not only listen to violent stories, they've created one of their own.
We had it in their own words, talking about what happened.
On the victim's own audio recorder, Sean and Ian have delivered a blow-by-blow account of their crime in rhyme.
I stabbed him in the throat and then I stabbed him in the head.
There was this desire to not only commit the crime, but to later celebrate it.
What they rapped about on the recorder matched the physical evidence at the scene. It was almost like a roadmap to how it all occurred.
Armed with this rap roadmap, Stroudsburg police can retrace what happened to Michael Goucher. On the night of February 3rd, 2009, fueled by cough syrup and marijuana, Sean and Ian want to ramp up their dark temptation. How cool would it be if their violent rap lyrics were based on real life or real death?
We gotta make this real.
Why do you think I brought this?
Let's get him.
They were so into it that they wanted to take it to the next level, to make it real.
Sean messages Michael Goucher to meet him after work.
I believe that Michael Goucher was an easy target for the killers. someone they could lure to a place of isolation, someone who wouldn't necessarily advertise where he was going and what he would be doing, somebody that would not want that necessarily to get out.
Michael is lured to a secluded road for the secret rendezvous.
Directions were given by Fremore to Goucher about the location, how to get to the bridge on Snow Hill Road. Fremore convinced him to go out of the car.
Hey, this is nice.
Oh, thanks. It's
a little dark.
Yeah, new band.
Yeah? I like it.
And follow him down underneath this old rusted out bridge.
Not here. Over by the bridge?
He told him, come on, we're gonna go have sex underneath the bridge.
What Michael doesn't know is that Sean's brought company.
Ian Seagraves was waiting under the bridge.
The song talks about how they're waiting with anticipation.
It was cold, but I wasn't alone tripping.
Waiting for the kid to commence with throat ripping. That's the opening 2 lines. The victim's let down, sits down.
When they came under, I was sitting in the dark cover.
And at that point is stabbed.
He sat next to me and I stabbed him.
It didn't penetrate the skull, kind of careened off the side of the skull and out the other side of the scalp. The song talks about how he runs.
He started to choke, but he started to run.
Mr. Goucher ran out from under the bridge. As he was running out, he dropped his cell phone.
Michael Goucher's last desperate hope is his Crime Watch 2-way radio. But it's out of range. And now, out of order.
The song talks about how they catch him and how he's pleading and how they're stabbing him and how they're scaring him with what they call reverse talk. That's a demonic speech. Everything's in reverse. So the reverse talk was designed to frighten him, and I'm sure it did.
Once it started, there was no stopping them. They weren't going to turn back.
The teens make a half-baked attempt to cover their tracks and make it look like a robbery. Then they head home.
We ready?
Yeah.
All right, let's go. It was cold, but I wasn't alone tripping, waiting for the kid to commit.
They not only write the whole story in song,
He sat next to me and I stabbed him.
they also brag about it online.
After the homicide, Ian Seagraves had gone back to his MySpace page and he had changed his screen name to Throat Stabber. And when he was asked by one of his friends, you know, why did you change your name? And his response was, because I did it.
I believe Seagraves was probably very intelligent, and he had a greater degree of depravity as well. Seemed to be more of the leader, even though he was the younger of the two. But clearly he was the more intelligent, the more creative of the two, kind of like the idea man, and he was the one to strike the first blow at Mr. Goucher.
At the crime scene, they've also left damning clues on the murder weapons.
One butcher knife in particular was of interest to us because it was wrapped in duct tape, the handle, which may be a good source for DNA and/or fingerprints.
The forensics units removed the duct tape and they were able to find a fingerprint on there. Compare it to a known print card from Ian Seagraves and say, this is a match to Ian Seagraves.
The teenagers show no remorse. They're pleased with their violent night.
This was something exciting, something they were proud of, something they looked forward to memorializing in verse and song. I don't believe that Fremore and Seagraves lost touch with reality. I believe that they perpetrated the murder knowing that they were taking the life of a human being. They believed that it gave them a status.
Instead of boosting their status, the heinous act divides the Juggalo community. Many speak out against it.
At the trial, we had called several witnesses who were into that music that actually testified against Seagraves and Fremore.
The teenagers go on trial in September 2011. Inside the Monroe County Courthouse, the savagery of the murder songs stuns the public gallery.
But I wasn't alone tripping, Waiting for the kid to commence to throw ripping when they came under our sin in the dark cover.
I think definitely among the victims' family members, there was this horrified silence. You know, people listened to this and thought they're actually describing in detail how they murdered our loved one.
The teenagers aren't fazed. 17-year-old Ian Seagraves relishes his moment of fame.
He made it his job to glare at us and smile. And when I played his song in front of the judge, his head was bopping up and down and he was getting into the beat.
First Assistant District Attorney Mike Mancuso is still horrified by the futility of this crime.
I've come across many bloody, depraved crimes where the motives were outrageous, but there was usually some measurable reason, be it often bad reasons, but a measurable reason. This was solely for the purpose of thrill. And to that degree, I have never come across a case like this.
Stroudsburg is also outraged by this atrocious attack. Residents later erecting a simple memorial for a young life lost too soon.
What makes this case stand out for me is the brutality of the crime and the tragedy of such a young victim losing his life in such a way.
He was only 22 years old. He had his whole future ahead of him.
Condemned by their own twisted lyrics, Sean Freemore and Ian Seagraves are found guilty of first-degree murder. They are both sentenced to life in prison with no hope of parole.
I think it's clear that we can't blame the band or their music for this crime. Like a lot of things in popular culture, people who listen to it or watch it can interpret it literally, or they can take it to an extreme.
There's millions of people who listen to their music and aren't out committing crimes.
These Stroudsburg teens took their dark temptation way too far, believing this sick crime would help them transcend their mundane lives.
Seagraves even bragged to a friend, "We're real killers, not like the ICP." They wanted to outdo the insane clown posse and be real killers.
Instead, they languish in their self-made version of hell.
They had a kind of post-apocalyptic kind of view. They had no hope for their own lives, for their own future, that they were willing to throw it all away.